regular windsurfer down here who's bought a lot of equipment here, and he's videotaping the whole thing today, which will be available on online YouTube or Vimeo later on. It's a fantastic lot of work that he's doing. And Tim Lelliott, can you stop it, Tim? And now I'd like to hand over to Bret and Marcello. Good man. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Pratty. Yeah, I've just got a few thank yous to start with. To Pratty for organising and getting such a great crowd here. So well done. Give him a clap.
Now I'll go get a drink for you.
Simon Grosser for his enthusiasm for the event as well. Where are you, Simon? Oh, there you are. Simon and the lovely Kim. So for his enthusiasm to get this event up and running. And to the other Simon, who's up the back doing some amazing technology. And I walked in and saw him there and thought, oh no, none of a DJ night. State titles, that was trouble. Okay. But thank you to those guys and thank you to everyone for coming. It's an amazing crowd that I see in front of me today. So my recollections of Marcello. I was windsurfing with Shane and PJ and the Pridhams and a few of the people at the beginning of windsurfing. We all bought our first boards, the Windsurf, the plastic original Windsurfer, and we did state titles and events and regattas. And I think at the time we were also building fiberglass boards. Shane was building one in his unit. He remembers that. I was building them under the house at my parents' place. And but little did I know that Marcello, who turned up at some of these events, and I saw him around a fair bit, was off doing some other amazing stuff in windsurfing, along with a few other guys that are here tonight. So I'm really interested to hear those stories, and we'll move on to that in a minute. It's a credit to Marcello to see the people that are here in the room. And most of you know him personally, and it's amazing just to be walking along the beach and find Marcello, and he just wants to chat and look out and see people windsurfing and say, isn't it amazing? It's really good to see so many kids on the water and so many people windsurfing. So it is an amazing crowd. It reminds me more of a board sailor's bowl, looking at this crowd and this venue. But yeah, we haven't been able to organise one of them, but maybe again in the future. I know that Marcello's legacy will live on through Kat and Andre and Heidi, who's a bit of a keen sailor. Where are you? There you are, Heidi. So, yeah, so there's some young Costas involved, and yeah, we hope to see you sailing and windsurfing at the club for many years to come. All of you. You too, Kat. Yeah. I had a little bit of knowledge of what was happening with some people that sailed around Highmarsh Island, I think, and did some crazy trips down the Coorong. There's a couple of names like Tim Day. Is he here?
No, lost track of him.
Oh, there's a couple of other names and there's a couple of blokes here that I'm looking at and going, oh, I know you. But anyway, there were a few stories of some really long windsurfing events, and I'm pretty sure Marcello was behind most of them. So I'm really interested to hear about that. But what I didn't know, and what I've just found out very recently, is that before I met Marcello and before windsurfing hit South Australia, he did some amazing things. I've got some notes here. I won't kill his stories, but you know, there's some mountaineering stories from all over the place. So I'm really keen to hear about them, Marcello. And just to get him started, I think we should give him a bit of a clap. Marcello Costa, a very famous man in windsurfing in South Australia. So the first question I've got for Marcello, and I'm going to sit down and only interrupt if you talk for too long, and we'll get questions from around the group as well. But how did it all start? What was your youth like? Where did you grow up, and how did you get into adventure? That's a massive question. I know. That's what I do.
Well, I hope you're offering some breakfast too.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Bret, thank you so much. I was going to sit, but actually I realized I gave all my lectures standing up, so why not this time? And I think with Bret next to me, he will interrupt me, I'm sure, often enough. But thank you very much, Bret. Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you very much, of course, all of you, and Simon and Kim coming all the way from Sydney, and Simon behind there, who I didn't know was a professional recorder, so we'll measure your abilities pretty soon, but I can count on them. So my experience has been so extraordinary in my life. Of course, I'm going to be hopefully 83 in a few weeks, and I had actually almost half of my life. One without windsurfing, and the other half with windsurfing. So that's how I divide my life. And if I have to think, well, how my early life started, completely in a different field. And you can see there, I grew up in the Alps, near Turin. I was born at the very beginning of the Second World War in Italy. So I was a pre-war kid, in a way. And people tell me that I could actually ski before I could walk. I'm not sure, I don't remember. And my house, the family house, is still there. There was a postcard with the Villa Costa. The name has changed, but the house is still there. So I grew up in the mountains. And somehow that made me, first of all, a mountaineer. So we'll find out how I got to the sea. And in a way, in a brief summary of my, why this not working? Oh yeah. How I got to Australia for a start. Yep. Well, my family, my father died at the end of the war. He was a resistance fighter and he was killed by the Germans. My mother remarried, and in 1949 we all migrated to Argentina, as many Italians did. And I lived there happily for 11 years, which I did a lot of things you're going to find out. And then I went back in 1960, back to Turin, to Italy, to do medicine, which I finished in 1967. Then in 1970, I got married with my lovely wife, Daniela, and we came to Australia, first to Melbourne. And then 5 years later, the School of Medicine started at Flinders, and I was appointed a young lecturer. And I can see there Malcolm nodding, because he's one of the poor guys that was suffering my teaching earlier on. And now I have to be careful, because at least I'm not a kid, so I'm not likely to fall under his spell. But you can count on him as a good pediatrician. So in a way, I started at Flinders, and I worked for the last 47 years there. And I officially left, although I still got plenty of students and friends working there. So in a way, my life really was well grounded at Flinders in South Australia. And so in a way, one can ask, what did I do in all my life? I've been incredibly lucky. This is not to boast my past, but it's to see how much recognition I got in life. And just to point the important things, I was made a Fellow of Australian Academy. I became a Knight of Italian Republic. I got the Centenary Medal in 2003. I was made Matthew Flinders Distinguished Professor of Flinders. And very importantly, I got a life achievement of all the neuroscientists in my area around the world in Amsterdam. But may I say that to me, receiving an accolade and friendship from my peers has been the top of my life. And I think you are part of it. And although I'm not competing with you in any way, your presence here tells me that I've been recognized also by real peers and pioneers in windsurfing. So I thank you all for you to be here, of course. So this guy could have asked the question, what do you do before coming to Australia?
I have a question, because your next note here is what adventures before sailboarding. So all of that time, how did you get time to do adventuring if you were doing all that?
Some of my colleagues wonder about that too.
And were there any water sports in your youth?
Not really, not really. The only time I went, I'll show a picture later on, but I almost, twice I almost died and was always in water, either the waves of Rio de Janeiro or being underwater in Yugoslavia. So water hasn't been my sport for a long time, and it's still probably not a sport. I like to be above the water.
Okay. Yeah, a long way above the water, up a mountain somewhere.
Or just above, above the water is enough.
Very good.
So anyway, you realize that when I went to South America, I was 9. and I stayed there until 20, and I had a good chance to be part of an expedition, and I think I can show some pictures. First of all, this is a picture I took many years ago from beginning 58 to 1960. All those are my trips in South America, and I'm going to just tell briefly about two of them. So you can see there, Buenos Aires is where I live. There, the city capital of Argentina. I went to Patagonia, this white area, you see some pictures. Then I went to Peru, some mountains, and I descended the Amazon River. So I can show you that I was there, indeed. That was part of my excitement. I was 19 when I participated in an expedition of 6. We ended up remaining in 3, not because the other 3 died, but because they escaped the terrible weather of the Patagonian ice fields. And you can see here we were under a mountain that eventually we went back, you see, soon. And this is the area, the southern ice pack in Patagonia between Argentina and Chile. So we were the first one to enter and name of some of the mountains. So that was a big adventure of my life when I was 19, still before going back to Europe and to do medicine. We returned there. I returned there with my good son André, my nephew Guy, and my brother. And there we are at the top of that very mountain you saw before. We went back and climbed that mountain in the middle of the storm. And then I returned back in 2005, really in search of our camp, our base camp in the middle of the forest. And of course, we realized that the glacier disappeared. This glacier was really where I am here. And so we used to walk on the side to this ice pack, and now it has retreated quite dramatically, of course. I was searching for a base camp where I left a message back in 1959 to posterity. I left in a little cup under a tree. Of course, not only we couldn't find the cup, but the trees were no longer there. The whole geography changed. And so that was a lesson that we were still there, but geography doesn't really remain the same. Then, of course, I managed to, in the same year that I returned to, I can go forward. Okay. The year I returned to Italy, I managed to go to Peru, Machu Picchu, and I managed to climb 2 mountains solo because my brother was sick of high mountain, and so I climbed solo at the time. We talk about a little bit later about what is the meaning of doing things solo, with all the danger, but all the excitement. So there I took a picture, but just in case I took a picture of my hat, just in case I disappeared. And that's another mountain I climbed on my own. And so this were a mountain above 5,600 meters. And so I had experience of feeling breathless, which if I feel that now is no longer a surprise. And then I descended the Amazon River from Peru with my brother.
Is this you with the guitar?
That's me with the guitar, yes.
Okay, did anyone bring a guitar?
I still got that guitar. I bought it actually in Peru. And of course, we have my grandson, Orlando, is a top player of guitar. And of course, Andrea as well. They used to play in bands and so on. But I never played in bands, but I still play South American folk by and large. So back there, I even had a little beer. The only time, actually twice I had beer. That's one time when I returned to Buenos Aires. Okay, so then, of course, going back to Italy, I was in the area, naturally, of the Alps. And the Alps are very, I thought were easy compared to the Andes, where I climb in the wilderness. And so I took very, very easy, I thought were easy mountains. And I did a course in climbing. I became an assistant instructor. And of course, for me, it was easy to do the very obvious ones. Okay. Of course, the Matterhorn, Cervino in Italian, that's the last bit of the climb, which I was helping some good 2 friends, which are actually guides, changing some of the fixed ropes for the normal climbers. And we spent there a whole day, and we slept on the top for about a few hours. On the other hand, climbing the Mont Blanc a few years earlier, actually, later, I take it back. That was actually through very cold at the end of the summer, and I got actually frozen eyes at the time I arrived at the top, so I came back all the way down, practically blind, with this help that told me to jump over crevasses so that I could get back. So this is part of my adventure when I was, at the time I was actually, when I did the Mont Blanc, I was already in Australia, but I had a sabbatical in Europe. of course, then I spent time again in '87 up in Oregon, a beautiful mountain, the Mount Hood. And we spent time there with a friend of mine sleeping on top. Daniela accompanied me a number of times on cross-country skis. And you can see here a picture of an Andrea, very young, probably 80 years old, and then back there to a mountain in Italy. That's the Matterhorn. And then he really became quite proficient in proper climbing, like his father. So in a way, they followed my steps in a much better way, as usually children do. They are much better than their parents. And I like to think that that's true for you too. Just to close, yes, thank you, remind me, good, Andrea. I tell this to my students, so it's good. I told you the new generation are better than the old one in every single case. So if I can, okay, now you can ask the next question.
Yes, I think we're going to stop for a moment there. So I know, looking at some of those pictures and some of the dates, I'm thinking, what was I doing in the 80s? And our adventuring was getting in an old Holden and driving down to Middleton and trying to windsurf in the waves. And Marcello is climbing mountains on his own and sleeping up there and doing amazing things, which is just, you know, there's obviously a lot more to these stories that could be teased out. And before we move on to his sailboarding, I just want to see if there's any questions from the group on some of those amazing pictures we've seen and some of those locations. Come on, guys, a couple of quick questions. Yep, we've got Dave Rawson over here.
Mine's a little bit unrelated, but seeing you lived in France and you lived in Argentina, who are you going for in the football tonight?
Very good.
Yes, a very good question. Well, I live in 3 continents, and just as well that Australia is not on the run, because I would have suffered twice. Well, living in 3 continents and having a heart in all 3 is like war. I did actually swear to the, if you like, to the flags of Argentina first, of Italy second, and Australia third. So I think that's the best way that will ensure that I will never go to war with any of those countries, by the way. And so now I'll be going interesting. I like to think that I'll be looking more for the individuals, players, and I'm going to enjoy whoever wins because I know that the world will erupt around them. Argentina has my probably best wishes because they have a sense of being always at the end of the world, a bit like Australia. So if they can beat the Europeans, they will feel very good. And I think they do deserve, because they are messy people. You know, my brother lives in Argentina. He keeps telling me, Argentina, Australia like Argentina, but that did work. So it's a country that works, while Argentina failed very many times. So I really hope that at least they succeed in this. So thank you for the question anyway.
And are you getting up at, is it 2 a.m.? 1:30. Will you be up tonight for the game?
Oh, I'll see. Possibly.
See how drinks goes. Any other questions on the mountaineering part of Tom Crabb?
Over your obviously illustrious career and your passion and your recreation and your professional life, given we have so much technology now, do you see a decline in the romance of adventure?
Ooh.
No, not really, because every generation thinks exactly that way. And so I stopped climbing, by the way. I was the first one to climb in some walls near Turin, competing for speed. And I thought it was crazy. And then after me, everybody did. I wasn't the first one to start, but the sport of actually mountaineering has changed. I think actually we'll get back to talk when we talk about actually sailing short and long distances, because I still think that the technology has always been with us. We wouldn't windsurf without the technology of making boards. So in a way, I think I will not complain if the next proper generation will use something completely different from what you see now in the waters. So I'm not particularly scared of that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, I was going to ask for a female question. Go Kim, go Kim.
Marcello, con rispetto, tua moglie è un'avventuressa come tu?
What?
Yeah, I was thinking that too, actually.
Well done.
She,
Hey.
she's duly tried to
Salute.
impress you by speaking my language, my other language, one of the three languages, the Italian. So the,
Multidialetto a Torino, non romano.
yeah, of course, she's claiming that in Italy there are so many languages, and she doesn't speak the one I come from, and so we cannot understand each other by and
Romano è
large.
vero.
Yeah. The Romans speak a different language. Well, the question is whether Daniela has done something similar. Daniela has done more than I did. I can tell you straight away, for society, because my activities were by and large of exploration, and you do exploration with other friends and people, and you get excited, but what you leave behind is something that may have a value of its own, like I think you do, but the people that really do the work in society, like Daniela's a doctor, now a GP, she worked with refugees in Australia for a long time. She probably left far more in society a mark than I did. But I take the opportunity, yeah, but I take the opportunity to say something about the fact that we've all been very lucky. I've been very lucky having my 80 years or close after the Second World War, where we all, by and large, we missed big social disasters in Italy, Argentina, Australia. We have fundamentally social democracy based on the rule of law, not always, but by and large. And we are not under any dictatorship. We're not under theocracies. We can see, and slowly women are getting their due. And in a way, I think I'm very lucky to have lived this period, although from now on, our younger people will have a much greater task to keep it that way. So we can keep going.
Let me get the name right. Daniela?
Daniela.
Daniela. And everything she's done. Well done. Good words. And we're going to move on to sailboarding and board sailing and windsurfing and whatever you want to call it. But let's hear Marcello's viewpoint.
Now, somebody asked me whether I did a lot of water sport. Not me, I did a lot of snorkeling. I still do every so often with my granddaughter Heidi. But I always dreamed to be able to drive, to be driven underwater by a friendly shark. And I think that's what it is, I believe. It can be forward. Oh, yes, yeah. Anyway, that's me being taken underwater somewhere in the Fiji Islands. And so anyway, that I achieved my dream in my life of...
I thought it was Brighton Jetty.
These days it could be, actually, yes. Anyway, this has become from my first board. Now, somebody may or may not recognize the top left board, which is in the backyard of my home now. It's actually the first board that I purchased. Imagine from whom?
What?
Yes.
What is that?
Yes. And
Custom made?
I presume so. And I remember you look at me with very strange eyes, quite correctly, when I insisted you to put a big keg in the middle, long center, a center board fix, which wouldn't be useful for any such. But I learned to windsurf on that. And in fact, I remember that Ian Gibbons and Julie Morris, by the way, I'll see pictures of them later on, also learned on that board. So if anybody can sail that, could sail anything else in the end. Then, of course, in the same...
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yes. Then in the same shop that you were, that was still here in Whitlam Avenue.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I bought my first proper board, the Jet.
Proper board, thank you.
And then we moved the F2. This is Daniel, believe it or not, that's Daniel also did it, there is. And of course, Andrea did it when he was young and a bit later, and of course he still does, and you see him in the water often enough. So this was my first test with board, but I couldn't understand how people could sail a proper windsurfer. And I started racing here, and I couldn't think of how I could finish the triangle. And I remember in my macho style of Italian, there was a lady there who became a very famous social scientist who did normally race. And I told myself, if she can bloody do it, I'll bloody do it too. And in a way, that was the first time I had actually a woman above me, way above, and that was really fantastic to try to match her skills. And in a way, that took me to the next level of windsurfing. First of all, let's go back to the real pioneers.
Guys out.
Now, I don't know who this guy is, but you can probably recognize. Shane is just recent, so he's the same now because it was just a few weeks ago. And of course, team day, I did a lot of things with him. You can see him later on. I lost track of him. He became a mountaineer. He went to the States, and I don't know where he is now. He abandoned completely, but you'll see how many things we did together. And of course, Lindsay was critical in helping us. You can see some of the things. And of course, Phil Bash, who left us too early. You remember him just 2 years ago at the Nationals here. And so this, in my view, were the proper pioneers because they did things which are, in my view, quite unbelievable. And if I think I did a lot of things, I follow them. So I really did stand on the top of these giants.
I was a bit worried I wasn't going to make the list. I'm okay now.
Anyway, to go back to 1981. I started in 1980. At the time, I didn't know much about what was going on. But this was already going on. You see, there is Phil Bash, together with Peter Rees. They crossed the Gulf from Glenelg to Port Vincent with a tandem. Crazy. I did try the tandem. It's terrible. Probably you tried it. It's really very hard and difficult. And then Phil Bash, the day after, crossed the peninsula and went all the way to Port Lincoln in 12 and a half hours. With boats, of course. He was safe, but it was hard going. So that was the beginning, and very few people probably knew about this. In fact, that was the article appear on the advertiser, and you can see here, in fact, Phil a few years ago, and Phil 2 years ago, and of course you see Grant Evans, who also left us, unfortunately, but fortunately we have here still Malcolm with us. And
yeah, stick around, Malcolm.
that is why. Well, that's the sense of life. I think we have to be happy to be here. Full stop. Now, this is something I was hoping actually that Lindsay would be here. We failed to contact him because his son never seemed to answer the phone. And Lindsay has been very critical in many advances of sailboarding. And I didn't know that in 1982 he did solo this crossing from Waiala to Port Pili, solo. And of course, I don't know exactly how happy because he never told the story. I found this through, of course, John Roddy, who is here in the front row, who is really our historical record because he has been the secretary of the Windsurfers Association and running the newsletters. And so we went through all the newsletter in the past few weeks and discovered a lot of things, including this one.
Let's hear it for John Roddy.
Yeah, John Roddy.
Yeah, good work.
So, indeed, you can ask me this question.
Well, my question here, Marcello, is out of all of those three, which one did you find the most interesting? And which one did you do the most of?
Probably all three, but this gave me the chance of saying something about what are they in relation to us individuals that race. Well, you cannot learn doing a proper sport, in my view, unless you're racing. And I say this is part of the fact. My good friend Bill Blessing, who is sitting behind there, you see him a bit later, we did a lot of things together, and I don't regard myself better than he is, but me racing compelled me to do things which otherwise I wouldn't have done. And you're compelled to do it because you're competing with others, and just as I said before, if this lady could do it, so should I be able to do it too. So club racing is the key of learning a skill, and then you are comparing yourself to other individuals, which is a very natural human endeavor, and all of you here are part of that, and you understand exactly why you do it. But so in a way, it's a taste.
Can I point something out there? Like, I think Marcello's club racing was here at Brighton Seacliff Yacht Club when we had 35 boards on a course out to the south there, run by a guy called Vic. Yeah. Yep. Webby was involved. Yeah, right. But we had some windsurfers, some Dew4s, some F2 Lightnings. There was some specialist speed race boards. There was some Toronces. There was all types of craft in that fleet. Cool. And 35 boards on the water every Saturday for a short period of time, I think. And now we're seeing almost the same numbers, but they're all windsurfer LTs.
Yes, indeed, and I'm delighted.
I think it's good for all of us.
It's very good, very good. But the competing with other people is a very natural human endeavor and is the bit that makes us better. Now, of course, when I started, I never dreamed to come first, but I promised myself to try not to ever get last. In fact, it was last year I arrived last, and that's why I stopped sailing last year.
Is that what happened?
Yes. Nothing to do with old age, just... Then long races, marathons. We did them, and in a way there, instead of competing with other people, we are, when we go a long way crossing, like, we get to some example of that, we're really competing with the elements. You're not trying to win. If you try, then that's fine, but more importantly, you try to finish. And try to finish means that you're trying to be as good as the weather allows you. So it's a test of you and the environment. The long-range sailboarding, which is not with many people, you can do on one or two or yourself alone, has no other aim than opening a new kind of crossing waters. And you're not fighting against other people, not competing. You're not fighting against the element. You're really fighting against yourself. Mm. You have to find your way of existing in a place, and you can exist in the place only if you are very humble to the environment. You see that how many times with Bill Blessing and Tim Day we attempted to go from Cape Jarvis to Adelaide. We eventually did it, but we tried at least 10 times, and we gave up when we couldn't. The same thing in the mountains. I survived the mountain because I was able to stop before I died. So doing the long-range sailboarding is like going solo in the mountains. You have to be very careful, very feeling well, and if you are with somebody else, like I was very often with Bill Blessing, we confessed each other only recently that we knew in our heart that we couldn't really save each other if something went wrong. We had to be independent and autonomous. But the fact you did that together with somebody else gave you the feeling that you simply were not alone. And then when you're alone, you can still feel the same with other people, things about the family, friends, and so on. So this is the three feeling that the three kind of sailboarding.
And I now have a question. So I get club racing and state titles and nationals, and I did a few long races and marathons. So I did KI and back about 4 times. I did Whyalla to Port Lelliott and back, and I did Port Perry to Whyalla, which was 42 Ks. And it's just a one-off race. I don't think we even carried water. We just did 42 Ks and drank beer when we got there. But long-range sailboarding, some people are probably thinking the same question. Is this where you actually pack gear on your board? Do you actually sail for a day and then make camp and then continue the next day? Or do you have a backup car? How does the logistics work?
Yes, all of that. Sometimes we did, and you see some pictures. When you cross something that one way like the Gulf, you hope you don't have to spend the night there. But we did carry flares and water and food for a few days. True. Otherwise, you're right. We took a lot of backpack initially. Then we learned that we didn't need to take that much. But I remember I bought a backpack from the New Zealand Army. That was the only one that you could actually were impermeable, and you could close them by closing completely impermeable, so I could take them to the water. But normally, if it's only a day, you just take food and water for a couple of days.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's take example. Well, I was told, I wasn't there yet, but at the club here, the club was the first one to hold windsurfing races, and that was done at the end of 1970s, 1979. And I didn't have any particular record of it, although we did find a little article on it with John Roddy. Then was the fantastic decade of 1980 to about early 90s. That was really the golden period of sailboarding in South Australia. And some of them were there, and you remember them. This is just to show you just a picture from one of the newsletters that John did in 1991, 82, a calendar. And you can see huge number of things just happening in South Australia. And just a huge number of people took on windsurfing and sailboarding. The two things are not the same. Windsurfing is specific for the brand windsurfing that was invented back in 1976 in California. Sailboarding is overall covered also windsurfing, but it doesn't matter. Today you can use both. This shows that I was also part of it. Back in '84 there was a Metropolitan race. Yep. My scribble there, and that the thing to join, and I even got a 8th place, so that's to show I wasn't last. And so I did maintain my promise. Then, of course, in those years, there was a lot of activity. You see,
remember that day? Yes.
Bret is right. Just imagine, Glenelg, Rip Curl, with literally almost 100 sails from South Australia. You can see there, even I think that's Andrea, and that might be one of his younger mates, it might be Carl. And so they were all started, but we were quite a lot of activity there.
Where did we sail to that day?
Oh, I think it was just a triangle. Yeah? Okay. I can't remember. I don't have any other.
Who remembers where we sailed to? Where did we sail to, though?
Right at near the yacht. Where the car park is.
Right.
Where the apartment buildings are now, at the very end of the...
Oh, so we didn't sail south. I'm thinking of a different race.
Right at the end of Anzac Highway.
I remember a big race with lots of people. We departed Glenelg and we went to Port Noarlunga or something. Yeah, different day maybe, yeah.
And the year after, even more activity. Look, another picture. Unfortunately, this picture taken from negative, which are very old already. You can see there Phil Bache and myself and Andrea receiving something. Another race, a sailboard race invitation. As I said, there was a lot of activity in those years, which really was also the good basis for trying something different. That's why I started to do on my own, mostly because not arriving last was fine, but never arriving first was not fine either. No, that's not true.
Is this Phil here?
That's Phil Bache.
Nice F2 shirt, no board shorts. Can't do that anymore.
Now this shows that actually I was serving State Out in 1990. I was still active. You can see there our son and Carl Newbold and Dave Tonkin and Tom Lenter, who also died many years ago, very sadly, very good sailor. And Andrea was doing very well on his own there, of course. And then this shows that I arrived my peak by beating Phil Bache and Lindsay Newbold.
Well
so
done.
that was towards the end of my proper racing in the club and somewhere else. And again, here you can see in another 1990 the pentathlon, and Andrea did quite well, and I didn't do so badly. As I say, I didn't arrive last. And you can see there again Lindsay Newbold and Phil Bache and Grant Evans and Melanie Murray, of course. It has been. Yeah. I tried to contact her, but she didn't answer wherever she is. Now, 1991, I still participated. Andrea was with me to the Adelaide World Championships. You can see there Carl Newbold that arrived second. We discovered just today, clear now my backyard, the same thing for 5th place of Andrea. And it was quite a remarkable event. It was the first really World Championships in Adelaide. And I remember, of course, I didn't arrive first, far from it, but I didn't arrive last, except in one race. I arrived last 12 because the wind was so strong that everybody abandoned after the 12th, and I just made it in time to finish in time before the time you're supposed to finish after the first one.
Good work.
It was 36 knots with a windsurfer. And so I look back and say, how on earth did I do that? And so, and since then I never tried again. Anyway, that was quite fun. Then, of course, we had actually another 1993, 94. We did go to Newcastle, the very year of the earthquake, by the way. We were in the water, we didn't feel at all anything. And that was a big fleet. And I remember the marathon was starting from here and going all around this way. A terrible weather, big gust about 30 knots. And the only thing I can say, not only I did not arrive last, but it was a big component from Italians, including the European champion was from Italy, and wonderful ladies, absolutely top guys. None of them finished. I was the only, if you like, person of Italian origin that finished. I was very happy. And I remember still from the boat, somebody shouting, "Come on, Marcello, give up, give up." And, but I didn't. I was pig-headed in a way.
Good work.
Now, I got this on the mail by some of you. Probably you recognize some pictures there. Some of you are there. And just a collection of pictures for memory. Many of you probably have seen it.
Wouldn't recognise any of this.
No.
Now we come to the long races. Again, the very first long races, I think you're right. Bret started from Cape Jarvis to Penishaw back in 1980. That was done by, indeed, there is Phil Bash, Tim Day, Brian Regal, and Colin Tregenza.
Yep.
And you can see there Tim Day at the top. So I knew nothing about that for the time being. And then, of course, it happened a number of times. Used to be sometime in January, and then for a while was run on the very 1st of January, crazy. At 9 o'clock, 1st of January. Can you imagine what kind of end of the year night would have been the one before? In 1981, it was a second, and you can see there that Phil Bash also won the race across. So that's why I put Phil Bash as one of the proper pioneers of windsurfing in South Australia. And then, of course, we go quickly through, if I can, this not always, okay? In '83, I was there, and I know I was there because indeed Greg circulated this picture, and I could recognize in Penishaw my sail and my board. And so you can see there the usual suspects. Shane O'Gallaghan, Phil Bash, Bret Yardley, Tim Day, Simon Grosser, and again the light wind, and Carl Newbold was the son of Lindsay, was there, one of the younger. So you can see that the same people we see now were there already, so nothing new under the sun.
Beautiful.
A race I never knew existed until we went through some data with John and Agulva Meningi from 82 to 85. We ran ops that actually won all of them. And it was quite a long race. And I think with some boat with them, but I don't know. I don't know anything about anybody of you have been to the race. But you'll see something later. So these are long races. Then it came one also I didn't participate, but one first with Whyalla, Pond Loyalty. Many people did. And then we come to another one, which you probably remember, Bret, from indeed Port Pirie to Whyalla.
Yep.
It was quite a good crossing. And we were told that the local fishermen were kind to us because for the last 3 months, they stopped throwing off-hailed into the area, because that's the place where the shark go to reproduce. And indeed, we all survived the sharks at the time. Another race, I was there, 1985, long race, and Ian Gibney was there too, there is, and Daniela. A quiet day until we started, and a big wind of 30 knots hit us, and that was the race to Port Lolly, stopping and coming back. And you can see Simon Grosser finish first, Jason Coonan, Dave, and Brent Pridham. And of course, I also participated in the race. And I told you that when you race long races, you're fighting not other people, you're fighting not yourself, you're fighting the elements. And that was my peak of experience, because in that period, if I can go forward, yep, on the way back, I didn't finish.
Soft charges.
And I refused to be saved for a long time, so that when I finished eventually, I got rescued. I was given a certificate for pending assault charge to the skipper. Because I refused to accept, anyway. So that was the peak of my adventures in groups, anyway. Then, of course, Graham and John Roddy did also the Milan and and Gulva, another classic. It was done a number of other times. You may remember, some of you, the large fleet around Wardon Island with few other races. Again,
$250.
exactly. Again, the usual suspect: Simon Grosser, Jason Coonan, Kim Grosser, who is here, of course.
Hey, Kimmy.
And but more important, you see, I didn't arrive last either in that race. So that was quite an exciting race. Apparently, there was a shark was seen around, and we tended to ignore that. Delphin Island, you've probably never done that, and just as well.
Yeah.
Delphin Island, many years.
Fantastic.
A terrible race. People that didn't go to the sea thought it was easy. It was the most difficult race of all, because there was wind from all the place. You had to go under a bridge. It was actually disgusting racing and sailing. But you notice how I got better with age. In the same race, when I was just over 30, I arrived fifth. But when I was regarded 50, I got third. So that shows that when you get older, you get better.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, something I should be ashamed of, I don't remember the year, but Peter Stuyvesant organised a race in Glenelg here in Adelaide, and I made the mistake of winning a sail, and can you imagine race for a tobacco company? And looking back, I really am totally ashamed, but that proves the very point. Be careful that even sports can be bought by money, as you well know now with Qatar. So it doesn't matter how much passion you have in a sport, just watch the ethic and morality of it. So this I wanted to forget it, but I cannot.
Hey, Marcello, before you, just Brett,
Yes.
you know some names up there. That's Greg Glover receiving the award. Yeah, because he won
That is Greg Glover, yes.
and right to left is Tom Ludecky, Bruce Kendall, Arthur Brett, and I don't know who the others. Scotty O'Connor's without the hat on.
Scotty with a hat and a female. Wow. Tim, what did Greg Glover get?
Yeah, he won like the Masters.
Masters? Yeah, nice.
Like grandmaster.
And so these were only just the long marathon. But the real long range is even fun. First of all, let me introduce you my really good friend with whom I did a lot of these long ranges. Bill Blessing, of course, you will see him on the back there. The only thing that changes is that he doesn't run with a hat now, but the beard is still white as then. And of course, you met Tim Day, and Simon is here too with a good beard now, and Chris van der Boch.
That is Simon. That is Simon.
Chris is in Tasmania, a retired professor of geology. He's a superb man, discovering a lot of things underwater in South Australia and ships around the world. And so he makes guitar and was quite a good friend in sailboat. He never raced, that's why many of you don't know him.
Who's the third? So Marcello and then...
Bill Blessing.
Oh, that's Bill Blessing.
Yeah, Bill Blessing
same
there,
guy,
and then Tim and Simon.
Yeah.
You see picture of them again soon enough. First of all, see what we did. With Bill Blessing and myself, we went a long way out to meet the Adelaide trials for the America's Cup. And this boat came to us saying, go away. I said, come on, we go fast. We didn't realize how bloody fast the America's Cup.
Good work.
When they come against us, they really go up to about 20 knots upwind, and we were only going about 15 knots. So quite a good experience. Now, a brief mention of the Coorong. The Coorong is a fantastic wild area of South Australia, and I couldn't not fall in love with the Coorong, as I still do now. And so this is really a short story of our attempting to cross and eventually the successes of crossing. You can see there the Murray Mouth, and that's the islands, the Mandu Passage, and all the way going down about 120 kilometers of mixture between sweet and salty water. So we started, of course, no surprise, with Bill Blessing. 8 hours of fighting and taken from my writing on the newsletter of John Roddy. In January 85, the first attempt to the full crossing of the Coorong was made by Bill Blessing and myself. We started from Goulburn with full gear for camping. To answer your question, Bret, including water and tent, our hop was shattered by a 20-25 knots head wind from southeast. It blew for the full 8 hours of shore tacking duel against the wind and shallow mud at the edge of the channel. By 4 o'clock, we were stranded near Pelican Point, just south of the Tawicheri Channel. So you think, well, that's the end of it? No, knowing me and Bill, we probably wouldn't give up that easily. So we went back. The same day, we drove all the way down to Gemini Down, and we went all the way up, again, described in the rescue by local farmers. We drove to Gemini Down. We were rescued by a lot of people, by the way, too many to count, near Salt Creek, in the far south of Coorong, and started the second day from there, heading north. The quiet and peaceful ride in the morning through thousands of young pelicans hid signal of the ordeal to be faced in the afternoon. The low water left only a narrow channel meandering between mud and sandbanks. We took a wrong turn a few kilometers south of Parkner Point and had to drag our boat across sand and mud for several hours before discovering the main channel was there all the time. By then, the sea breeze had climbed to about 30 knots and we had to take refuge in the vicinity, McGrath Flat, after walking a sunset over innumerable three-cornered jacks. I didn't know what they were until the time.
So, Marcello, I've got one question. Why? Why? What keeps you going?
As a mountaineer, that was asked to a very famous British climber, because it's there.
Okay.
What a silly answer, isn't it? It's because in this you're trying to find yourself. If you didn't find yourself before, you're in trouble. So this was my way of testing. You see, I was telling you before, I grew up after the Second World War. My stepbrother was killed by the Germans, fighting against the Germans. My father died. My nephew, Guy, the son of my brother, died in the mountains. So I had a feeling I had to live a life for them too. And because fortunately there were no wars, I had to put myself to the grueling task, completely useless. But in a way, how lucky we are to be able to do useless things only for that, and find ourselves not by being heroes, as they are now, people around the world fighting wars, but by doing silly things like crossing the Gulf or crossing the Coorong. And then we tried another time in April with the good help of Ian Gibbons and with Judy Morris here. And so we went from there, from the McGrath Flat again, all the way up to Goulburn. Again, seeing the writing, if I can, okay, we can finish there. 4 stops to meet Judy, mark our exhilaration trip with increasing wind shifting to 20 knots sea breeze. We flew all the way. A 70-80 kilometer journey ending at Goulburn at about 6 p.m. Then I gave my little story of how nice it is to be in the Coorong. Safe because it cannot be taken to sea. It's quite safe and quite testing at times. Absolutely beautiful place. Now, with Lindsay, we thought of creating a kind of an association. On the left is my writing of a draft for an association of a long range, and on the right something we've written. It never really took off because we were only few, and probably quite rightly so. Not many people were crazy enough to put themselves into these streams. And then, of course, in October 1986, we did the very first long-range sailboarding across with many people. This is David Tonkin writing about it, about this 12 people, and then we tried again. So we did this a couple of times with different group of people, but camping on the way with our families. That was a great way of sailing the Coorong. Here we started in Gemini Down, stopping at Parker Point and camping there, a long point, and then finally Goulburn. We were helped enormously by Lindsay and Diane Newbold to hold really us together. And that is a trailer with all the goods that we had to change things if we needed. So that was a fantastic series of crossing, as I said, quite safe and quite exhilarating. And I'd recommend that if anybody can do it again, it would be a great exercise. This is a picture from those times. Here with Daniela, Bill Blessing. You can recognize a few people. That again, Bill Blessing and Julie Morris and Ian Gibbons. and Chris van der Boch. And of course here are the people. This was my sail at the time, 6.8 meter sail, and it'll return again. That's the partner point. So you can see it was a very, very interesting. We sail in the morning for 3 hours, and we spend the rest of the day going to the beach and get cocktails and pictures with the family. So that was a fantastic way of spending a weekend. And you can see here another pictures, similar, another group. And you can notice there young Andrea and Carl, young Andrea and Carl, and this only recently, Andrea Carl becoming bigger and bigger. You recognize this picture again, as I showed you before. We don't have very many other pictures, Bret, of you, but anyway, there you are. And so this was a fantastic time of doing this long-term crossing safely. We had rules. People had to be together in a body and having flares and all that stuff. People complain about flares because why do we need flares in the Coorong? Well, you can be a long way away from everybody else and getting lost. Then, of course, a number of times we did with Bill and Chris and families. We went to the Tawicheri Passage, and sometimes we went to a place called Lousy Jacks. The three of us, Bill Blessing and Chris van der Boch, we spent the night there using our sail as a tent. And of course, we didn't know that there was some water there. And when there's water, there are animals. And the animals which are more dangerous are snakes. And we did see some snakes, but it was very hot, so we had to sleep with a sleeping bag. I had a sleeping bag, had the bottom open. And so I spent the night thinking, should I sleep or should I keep the snake away? Anyway, that was a time when we did those things probably a few times a year. And finally, we get to the crossing, that famous picture on the advertiser. You saw before, the four of us, Bill Blessing, Tim Day, Simon Grosser and myself, crossing the Gulf, quite open. We had two boats of the 6th Squadron, Safe Squadron, and we did go across with them all the way to Edinburgh and return with them back. The hard bit was getting back because we're sitting on this boat for 3 hours, bouncing up and down, which was far worse than going on the way, about 6 hours. But it was fun. So in a way, they took pictures of us. At the beginning, we had a helicopter that tried to follow us. And if you ever try to sail with a helicopter above you with a windsurfer, it's not fun. And so we eventually sent the message was clearly not to be there, please. These are the pictures that I owe to Simon. Simon got all this picture. One of them I owe to Bill Blessing. This is a picture of just before and the return, the crossing here is the Sea Rescue Squadron. So that was great fun, quite safe, and I thought it was a good way to open. But then in 1988 we did that solo, Tim Day and myself. We started from Seacliff before we built our house there, and Daniela was supposed to be on a Saturday at the festival, and she rang the neighbors asking, are they gone? Are they still there? She said, no, they are not gone. It's a big storm. Of course, they didn't realize that we did go 9 o'clock that morning. So Daniela went happily the whole day, fortunately, without knowing that we were probably in the middle of the Gulf. So we crossed the Gulf in about 4 hours. We started with the idea with flares and food for about 3 days. And we were more scared of being stopped by the lack of wind, by the wind. So we started with a falling of a storm, about 25 knots. Usually you expected to go down to 20. It didn't. It went up to 30. So by the time we got to the other side, we couldn't think of coming back. And that really opened the real adventure. On the way back, we had to hitchhike back. And hitchhike back meant from Port Vincent to be taken to the main road, where we were fully dressed with our sails and trying to do hitchhike. Of course, didn't work until a rotten old car stopped full of dust, and a guy took us on. And when we started to drive, he said, I know who you are, guys, Secret Services. So he was drunk, and so as soon as we could get off, we did. We got a lovely guy that took us to Whyalla, to the north. One of the founder of the first fishing of abalone in Australia. He was a lovely guy. And then we were stopped at a petrol station a long way from the beach. And we hitchhiked there at the petrol station when a young Canadian was coming from fishing tuna, Paul Lincoln. He said, yes, well, I know who you are, guys, but what do you do here about 3 miles from the beach? So he took us all the way to Adelaide, and because Tim had to go that evening out to a dinner, and me too, they dropped us to the Arkaba Hotel. Not exactly on the beach. So at the Arkaba Hotel, I was there with my gear. I entered the Arkaba Hotel asking for a telephone to call a taxi, and a young lady in the group came out and says, hang gliding, windsurfing. So anyway, they took us that not far away, the taxi were in front of them, in front of the mental hospital. So the taxi man got me on, and me didn't speak a word. We went to the beach where Daniela was waiting here on the esplanade, and the only word he said, here he is, ma'am. So that was my adventure crossing the Gulf, as I said. As I said, it was quite fun. It was quite fun. So now quickly towards the end, another crossing we did with family, Cape Jarvis to Kingscott, and we spent the night there, and both ways, fantastic. Yep. But in a way, I organized that with families and friends and going across. I left everybody, they left. It was my turn to leave from Cape Jarvis and look down, and I didn't have my centerboard with a long board. So I started nevertheless, and I arrived about a couple of hours later than anybody else against the wind to Kingscott, but I still did it anyway. That was fun too.
Done.
So Cape Jarvis to Seacliff attempt. We tried from Cape Jarvis to Seacliff many times with Bill Blessing, and with Team Day, we really gave up a number of times for the reason I said. A number of times the sea rescue people came from beaches asking what on earth we were doing there a long way from the beach to windsurfer alone in the middle of nowhere. And Bill would have a story to tell if he had the courage to talk about his encounter, almost close encounter with a proper shark near Second Valley somewhere there. But eventually we did it one time with Team Day, 8 hours with a strong southeasterly, so flat water, a bit like yesterday. Nice. And we stopped at Karekalinga. It was an easy going in a way, and we were determined to finish, and we did. Some picture of that here is leaving from Cape Jarvis, that's Team Day, on the way, and arriving here about opposite Pornolanga, and here is at the beach, a picture that Bill Blessing took. So that was a great fun too. As I said, we didn't feel particularly in danger, although we were being taken away if we broke something. But I never broke anything on the water.
What board are you riding there? What model?
I think it was an F2, mine. His was a Tyrone-C, I guess.
That looks like a Tyrone-C over there.
You know Tyrone-C?
Yeah.
The sailor's Tyrone-C.
Mm.
Then something even more crazy we did with Bill Blessing. One day we wanted to visit the Encounter Bay, simply because that was the place where the French and the English met for the first time. We didn't know that that's also one of the places where the sharks tend to meet. And we knew that because when we stopped for lunch about there, the people, the sea rescue came to visit us saying, we're just having lunch. They came to see what's something wrong with us. We're just having lunch with the feet in the water. So, well, do you realize here that you don't put your feet in the water in this area? Yeah. Anyway, it was late in the afternoon, very gentle breeze, but we still continued all the way to the Marymouth entrance. It was a quiet day, gentle breeze, too gentle. We couldn't see the wave because you don't see the wave from the ocean. Huge waves, at least about this high. So I went first. I got the first wave, the second wave, the third one took me down completely. I managed to get ashore about 15 minutes later, and then, as Bill makes fun of me, eventually I turned around and see where Bill was, because he also came after me, but unlike me, he broke his mast. So we were stranded at the Marymouth. I went back here. I got a lift back to get the car, just in time because it was the last fisherman there. Bill, in the meantime, wobbled back to the barrage, and by 11 o'clock at night, we took the car to get back home. So it was our way of spending nice days, anyway. Then, of course, we went also all the way from Port Adelaide to Seacliff in a day which were wind from all over the place. We at the time, we didn't care. We even got 30 knots wind and rain, but we eventually finished to do that in an easy way. But I did another time. I realized I did once from Seacliff, following the Endeavour that in the meantime was arriving to Port Adelaide. Quite a nice breeze of about 15 knots. And I said, well, I'm going to find this boat. I realized that we were pretty much the same speed, but I couldn't go. And I only met the Endeavour here. And of course, a huge number of boats, water all over the place, but I didn't fall off. And then I came back all the way back to us. And I don't know how long it took, but probably the whole day. So at the time, I didn't think about thinking twice to follow my abilities. Some of you may remember we went, some of us, coming back to Flinders, to Seacliff from different beaches south of Adelaide, taking advantage of the sea breeze. In fact, even until about a couple of years ago, I used to go certainly every weekend to the next place just south of Port Langa and back in the afternoon solo. I never had any problem, and I still think that you could do it even easier these days. And some of you remember that actually Lindsay organised Wednesday afternoon, leaving about 5 o'clock, going north as far as you could. And eventually he would pick you up at particular places, about 6 or 7 places along the coast. And I was one of them. I never finished first, not too far away, but we were eventually stranded and scattered around the northern beaches. With Chris, I went around the island there, the Torrens Island. And with him and Andrea, we went across the southern part of that peninsula. Again, solo without this also any help. We did go around the Hindmarsh Island, and that was fun too. Again, not easy winds. Or the Mandu Islands around both ways. So that was quite fun to go through, quite safe waters. Then we decided that was the year in which there was a flood and the lake area was full of water. Happened every 10 years. So we took advantage. We went taking advantage of Lindsay trailer. He didn't come with us, but he lent us a small trailer. We went all the way, and I couldn't find information about the water. I rang the police, I rang the rangers and so on. None of them could tell me how much water was there until we realized why. This is the southern place. One day, 30 knot wind coming from west. And then the day after, the wind was coming from east. And we started to sail just for fun. And by the time we went about a mile out, the water receded about a kilometer, leaving a long mud up to here. We took about a couple of hours to get back. So just as well that we didn't go across, because it depends on the wind. Had we gone across as we intended, all the way from there to there and camping, we could have got stuck there for the rest of our lives. So in a way, like area is have to be careful with this. Then with Bill also we descended from the Murray, all the way like Alexandrina to Milan. This all alone, of course. Again another time from across Lake Alexandrina and Lake Albert. So this was our way of spending the weekend. Of course, meant we had to go 2 cars, leaving 1 car and coming back. All that goes without saying. Go on. Oh, okay. That is the end of
Time for questions.
Full story. Yes, question.
Yeah,
by
fantastic. And then I want you to explain what this Windsurf for Life means to you. I recall the Kangaroo Island crossing race, which I did about 4 of. It used to be in February on a dodge tide. And February is known for southeast winds, so you could reach across and reach back on a dodge tide. And then they, for some reason, changed it to
the
1st of January, New Year's Day, which could be any tide and any sort of wind. And yeah, we got sou'westers and big tides, and it got really hard. So I'm not sure if that's what sort of put an end to it, but the February dodge tide worked really well. It was great. Out of all those adventures, all those long distance windsurfing adventures, which one takes the cake?
I would probably say the one I did with Tin Day across the Gulf solo. Because we started without thinking that we were going to across. We said to each other, let's go for an hour. And if it's danger, we come back. And we never looked back. And in fact, when we arrived to the other side, we arrived at Port Vincent, but we aimed at Port Stansbury. So on the rocks, there was a guy that was a windsurfer, and he came to help us. And he asked him, "What are you?" And I said, "Is this Port Stansbury?" And he said, "No, it's Port Vincent. Where are you from?" And of course, we said Adelaide. I should have said Italy.
Yeah. Fantastic. So have we got any more questions from the group on Marcello's amazing windsurfing adventures? Come on, we need 3 questions. Yes, we've got Grant up the back.
Marcello, I just want to ask one thing. Like, you've obviously invested a lot over your lifetime in windsurfing gear, sails, boards, etc. How the hell did you get that all through your wife? I want to know your secret. And stay married. Right?
Well, the story goes that actually when I proposed to Daniela, she had just broken her leg skiing, so she could not escape. And second, I received an invitation to come to Australia for 18 months and a telegram from the guy that invited me to Melbourne. And with the telegram, I went to Daniela saying, "Well, I got this invitation. Do you want to marry me and come to Australia?" And she said yes. And so we came. So she was accustomed to follow me. And I can only say that I'm admired because I realized also why. At the time, she thought I was immortal. And she trusted whatever I did. So much so that when we went to Patagonia the second time in 1994 with Andre, my brother, and my nephew, all the Costas were in the middle of nowhere. And somebody told Daniela, "Do you realize that all your relatives are there and they could disappear?" And Daniela sounded incredibly surprised and she started to worry. So I like to think that Daniela did not worry because she had an enormous faith in me, and I recognized that. And I really am so thankful and so proud. So that's the simple answer. Simple answer. I'm
Well
thankful
done.
to you.
Another question up the back here. Thank you.
I must say that whenever Bill and Marcello took off, indeed, I had the feeling that they were invincible, so never occurred something could happen to them. This is amazing, really. Now I think about it. And, wow.
I think you're right.
Marcello, tu sai Lago di Garda per windsurfing?
Yes, I did windsurf in Lake of Garda, a superb place. In the same day, I windsurf. In the evening, I went to climb a mountain of ice. So I could do the 2 things in the same day, which was quite a good thing.
Molto buono Lago di Garda.
But I did also sail in Patagonia. I sail in the gorge in Portland, a fantastic place as well, where I learned to do shortboard across this short place where big ships were coming across all the time, and you had to miss them. They wouldn't stop. Anyway, Bill Blessing is here, so come.
We've got a questioner up the front. Let's hear it for Bill.
I haven't got a question, but I want to tell you one tiny little story about Marcello, because although I loved going on all the trips, I would never have gone by myself, because although I enjoyed the nature, I didn't have the urge, and also I was frightened all the time. I always felt the others were sailing really beautifully, and I was struggling like crazy. And please God, if I get there this time, I'll never go again. But Marcello was a tough boss, really. He was more experienced than I was, and we went on one of our times that we tried to go down the Coorong. We were tacking towards Tewitchery Barrage, because I don't know what the wind was, but it's very narrow and you've got to tack all the time. And Marcello and he sort of fitted us out And I said, Marcello, it's not snowing. You don't need your Patagonia sleeping bag and everything. But he had such a heavy weight on his back. And one time when he tapped, he fell in. And the weight was so heavy, and it was quite deep. And he hates actually just being in the water. He's not a great waterman, you wouldn't believe. Yeah. So he came up finally. I was relieved. I didn't want to go back by myself. And he got on his board and he looked at me with a glare and he said, "Never talk to me while I'm tacking."
Nice work.
Marcello, what's the secret to your fitness with windsurfing?
I think fitness comes with doing things that keep you fit.
Keep windsurfing.
If I were to be a very famous philosopher, say, well, if you want to learn the lyra, which is the little music instrument of the ancient Greece, if you want to learn to play that instrument, play that instrument.
Correct. Absolutely.
Anyway, so we are towards the end because I want to recall the very last bits, and it was a pleasure to be still part of the National Windsurfing. You may remember this happened just before COVID. In fact, we could have had all COVID here, by the way. And it was a pleasure to be at the same time in company with the youngest and being the oldest sailor at the time. And again, I wasn't last, so that to me was already quite an achievement. At the time I was, of course, already 80, and I thought that there's plenty of time for you to keep going.
So that's you sorry, that last photo, that's you in the middle with,
yes,
is it Aussie Higgins?
That's right, there are the two of us, yes, yes.
Youngest at the Nationals, well done.
And then Greg pointed that we were 3 of us of the family sailing in the same club 1 year at least. And therefore he took this picture, a movie for me, this is Andre, this is Orlando, who is back there, he's a good sailor too, and here. So with the 3 windsurfers in the only club in Australia that probably had the 3 generations of windsurfers. And that was a great pleasure. Greg, thank you for pointing that out. That was the only time we sailed together, by the way, but that's enough. That's good.
And that would have been a pretty expensive sail with the lack of life jackets.
Yeah.
I race always without a jacket. And I was never fined, I don't know why. I was too old probably to look for getting a fine. But I had a good reason. Because when I had once the jacket, I fell, a strong wind under the sail. And I just couldn't get out of the sail as quickly as I wanted. Without a jacket, you can. So I thought it was much safer for me to have no jacket but a wetsuit than to have a sail. So even when I raced there, I didn't use a jacket, you're right. Probably nobody there to tell me off. See, one thing about aging is that you can do whatever you like and nobody... And nobody can tell you off.
Yeah, not even marine safety.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, this was just last year. You can see familiar faces. I was lucky to be part of this group, and of course an older guy and a younger guy there. I think you have been a fantastic group of people to be with and really fill my life at the end of my career, not only as an academic, but as a sailboarder. And in a way, let me show you, I was still regarded part of your group recently. Absolutely. I was lucky in between 2 young girls there, which I realized they're much younger than me.
Sorry I didn't make the cut.
Yes, you didn't.
I did.
You did?
I just couldn't be there.
Couldn't be there? Oh,
yeah.
Well, you were added.
Over 60.
That was a fantastic group of over 60, which hopefully bear well, because if I still sailing until I was 80, many of you still got 20 years to go, so the system will go well. I think the new generation is looking after the topic and the sport very well, and I encourage you to follow, of course, all of you in the generation. You can see the 3 here. And just to finish, I think this is a picture of somebody farewell me, Greg, and as I farewell you guys, I like to think I am still looking past the horizon. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm just going to wrap it up. I just want to thank you all for coming. Like I said earlier, an amazing group of people and a lot of old faces in the room. And thank you so much, Marcello, for some amazing stories. We can hang out downstairs for a Chrissy drink and ask Marcello more questions. I think he's set the challenge for us. For the windsurfer group here at Brighton Seacliff Yacht Club, I think we need to, you know, stop just racing around the Cairns. Maybe we need to do some long-distance windsurfing. Maybe we need a Marcello Award or something. I think Pratty's onto it. Italy. I think Pratty is... Italy! All right. But I've had a wonderful night, and I think we should just have a really big round of applause for Marcello.
Well done. Well done. Could everybody here in the room that has sailed in any event that was on that screen, please stay back for 2 or 3 minutes down that end of the room, because Simon, our fantastic videographer, is going to take a photo of all of us who have actually been on the water with this man in the last 45 years or something. Please stay only, everybody. You know who you are. Be in the photo. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well done, Pratty.
Thank you, my friend.